My name is Nehal, and my name is Nehal Vyas, and I'm from California Institute of the Arts in Los Angeles, USA. I'm from India, but I've been studying here for my master's. The film is called Amma Ki Katha, which also translates to my grandmother's story, my grandmother's tale. And it looks at how the contours of India are being reshaped by using this mythology that I grew up listening to, but how it's being used as a political tool to divide the country right now. So, my grandmother used to tell me these stories. My father's mom, she never really went to school. And so, every night during bedtime, she would live with us because my grandfather passed away long ago. And she would tell us, me and my sister, these stories because she was reading these religious texts in the morning. And so, I had this amazing idea of like, wow, mythology can lead to all these imaginary worlds because in Hindu mythologies these creatures are becoming into humans and suddenly like fire turns into water and man turns into woman, so it was a very progressive sort of storytelling. But in the past like 10 years since our government has changed and we have BJP right now, it's kind of turned into a very a space where they're trying to use Hindutva as their future idea of what India is. And India is a secular country. When we got independence, like India's constitution is based on secularism. But suddenly it's becoming a single voice, and it's only like only Hindus can stay in this country, everybody else has to go. And when I came to America in 2019, it coincided with this huge protest that was happening back in the country, which was a Citizenship Amendment Act. And all my friends were out on the streets while I was here in a new country trying to figure out like how to respond to what was happening back home. And I just kind of started taking all the tools I was learning, all these like different strategies of image making to respond to what was happening there. And the mythology kind of became the main theme through which I wanted to talk about what's happening there. Yeah, I think I started editing when I was writing the film because I was looking at this mythology and it's 7 books of mythology. And initially it was going to be 7 chapters. But then I realized that I was lining myself with this one idea of storytelling again because I was just looking at the written text. But this story has been told over and over again in different mediums, in different modes. So I wanted to bring that multiplicity into the film itself. And like I've grown up watching Ram Leela, which is the theater section that happens in the film. It's something that gets performed every year in every street in the city during Diwali. And I knew I wanted that as a section. I knew I wanted animation as a section. So I started writing it like that, and almost like a dream, and like what's happening in the street and how it turns almost into a nightmare.
And
I was even making the images because I was writing like that. And so the process for like putting it together was pretty seamless. It's only the animations that actually came in the end because there were parts that I was like, I didn't know how they would fit together or how I would move from one section to another. And it was the same time when I was also learning the Oxberry, which is this machine which I was animating on. And I've learned painting in my school a lot. So I was like, maybe this becomes a way for me to move from this chapter to the other one.
yeah,
Yeah, so oral storytelling is really important in the country, so which is why folklore was definitely a part I wanted to include. I wanted that act of public storytelling where you're out on the street, and because that the play section is shot in my grandparents' garden, which is where me and my cousins used to put up these like little plays itself. So it became like a way of bringing that childhood play acting into a public space. Then the phytograms, which is the third section in the film, where I'm using the flower petals to make impressions on the film, was so I knew that I wanted to talk about the violence that's happening with this saffron color because that's the color of the stage right now. Saffron is related to Hinduism, and I wanted to talk about how this religion leads to this bloodshed that's happening in the country, but didn't want to do it with any graphic material. So I thought about how I could do it with just analog media that using a lot of like flowers on film, making sure the colors would come in a certain way. So texture became a very important role there. Then the first chapter, which is just documentary, was because I was looking at my city. Every time I would go back home, my city was like different a little bit, and I was thinking about how I could document that. And that's something that I was doing over the past 3 years, those images, and that became a thing. So I knew that it was like just looking at what's happening, documenting the city itself, looking at this folklore in a way of like public storytelling, looking at just the textures that I was remembering from back home, and then leaving in a very like dream space of utopia, like what could happen, could this country ever be democratic again? Yeah, I my mentor is Betsy Bromberg, and I absolutely love her analog work. So I was looking at those textures to remind myself of what I wanted to. The softness in her work is something that I was really like looking at how I could recreate that in a completely different context though. And then back in the country, there's a lot of filmmakers who I really love and admire, like Priya Sen, who has made incredible work. She's made this film called Ye Freedom Life, which um, again, like it's just that like the way she's able to interact with the local population in the country, or how her film speaks to the local population, is something that I wanted to have in my film. So I was looking at that, but I was also looking at a lot of just friends works in the community itself, and just being like, okay, like I like this work and I'm interested in how you have learned this technique and taking that back. So I also think CalArts really helps you build that space where everybody kind of just is like, hey, I've learned this tool in my class and maybe it works for you in your film and I'm gonna teach that. So I think that's more. I think I was looking more at like what was happening around me.